Were some questions about whether or not he was in Houston or whether or not he was in Atlanta. And right now, let's take a look at this. This is a live picture from the scene. You can see heavily armed law enforcement officers, suited up in full regalia, full SWAT gear with cameras on their helmets. They are fully armed, and this is in that neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta, where we now know that Derrick Groves was taken back into custody. So this is a live picture from the scene at this hour. Lots of law enforcement sources. You can see a police vest there. That's an indication that possibly Atlanta police are involved in this operation. We know that the U.S. Marshal's Office is likely involved in this situation, given that they have been the ones who've been leading the search for Derrick Groves. That is a SWAT vehicle that you can see right there that's now being maneuvered around this neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta. That is what we're looking at right now, is a heavily armored vehicle, likely part of possibly the Atlanta Police Department's SWAT unit. You see a police car there in the foreground, also an indicator that this is Atlanta police. I'm not familiar with what their police cruisers look like, but that is an indicator that this is actually Metro Atlanta Police possibly helping in this operation. We started to first get word, that looks like Clayton. I'm not sure. Clayton County Police, possibly, which you would think would be a sheriff's office. So maybe it's Clayton, Georgia. I'm not sure if this is like a smaller suburban municipality. We're going to have to kind of clarify the exact details of where exactly this is. Or that could just be a neighboring police department that has been assisting Atlanta police, assisting federal authorities, assisting a number of different law enforcement agencies as they tried to figure out whether or not, first, Derrick Groves was actually in this location, and secondly, how to find him and how to take him into custody. No word from any sort of law enforcement sources about whether or not, he was injured as they took him into custody or what his condition might be at this time. But we do know that he is in law enforcement custody per our law enforcement sources as of around 1 o'clock this afternoon. So this weeks-long manhunt is now over for Derrick Groves. The question now will be, number one, getting those details, trying to find out, exactly how this unfolded this afternoon in Atlanta, how law enforcement ended up getting a tip about where Derrick Groves might be. Of course, we do know that there is a huge reward for information, essentially, a type of bounty on his head for anybody who was able to provide a Crime Stoppers tip. I believe it's $100,000, something close to that, if I remember correctly, about how much money people could make just by tipping off the police about where he might be. So unclear at this point whether or not that huge reward for information played a role here. We would think that we would get those details as law enforcement, starts to make statements about this for the record. What we know right now is coming from our law enforcement sources. We're all, as reporters, trying to figure out what those details are, trying to get that information so that we can bring it to you and bring you the very latest as we continue this breaking news cut in for everyone out there. You can see lots of heavily armored vehicles. Just take a look at this on your screen right now. This is another heavily armored vehicle that's positioned in and around this house and this neighborhood in Southwest Atlanta. So huge law enforcement presence. I know if I'm one of the neighbors in that area, I'm wondering what in the world is going on there, especially since this has ties to New Orleans, not actually Atlanta. So the residents are probably very shocked about what they're seeing this afternoon. You can see, though, if you look at the different vests of these law enforcement officers, look, you can see Atlanta police right there. There's a police cruiser for them. So that's an indication that Atlanta police for Atlanta proper are involved in this operation. You can see the SWAT vehicles are being moved. What we do know, from our law enforcement sources is that, again, this is happening and unfolding before your eyes right now in this Southwest Atlanta neighborhood. What we do have some new information coming in. Mike McDaniel is joining me here in the studio. We're going to continue to look at this live picture. But, Mike, just tell us what we have new information-wise in terms of what's going on there in Atlanta.
Yeah, and so in regards to some of those sources, they did tell us that he was walked out in handcuffs. So that does tell us apparently he is in good condition. Considering everything that's going on, you had all the gassing going on, you had him surrounded, barricaded, whatever the case may have been. So he seems to be fine, as opposed to being walked out in handcuffs. We have gotten a statement from the District Attorney, Jason Williams, here in the Orleans Parish. I'm going to read that for you here. Today, we have confirmed the escape inmate Derrick Groves has been captured in Atlanta, Georgia, following a standoff at a residence in southwest Atlanta after nearly 5 months on the run after his escape from Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office custody on May 16th, 2025. Now, it goes on to say Groves' escape represented a serious breach of public safety. You've been talking about that. Of course, the historic failure, as we've seen when it comes to custodial security there at the jail. His capture brings a long way to come to victims, their families, the witnesses who testified, the assistant district attorneys who prosecuted him, and the people of New Orleans who were rightly concerned that a convicted violent offender had escaped so easily and evaded justice for so long. And that brings another section to the fold here, is the people who were the victims
Absolutely.
of him, the people who testified against him. They have for months now been looking over their shoulder effectively. We know that they've been working with the Sheriff's Office as well as the District Attorney's Office, State Police, to try and get some type of protection in place, but you can only protect people out in the public for so long when you have someone like this, Derrick Groves, on the loose. So now this brings that finality to them, that maybe they can have some closure with this arrest that we now know happened in southwest Atlanta at that home.
Absolutely. You know, Derrick Groves is one of the inmates who was actually convicted. He was awaiting sentencing.
And the only one.
The only one, yes, who was post-conviction, who was in the jail, again, awaiting sentencing. At that point, he would have been transferred to a state prison to serve out the rest of his sentence. So now you would think that some additional charges would be added to what Derrick Groves has already been convicted of. We have reporters both in Atlanta and here in New Orleans standing by. Alyssa Curtis has been following this story as it's unfolded over the last 5 months. She's joining us now outside of the Sheriff's Office headquarters and Orleans Justice Center with the latest. So, Alyssa, what have you managed to find out so far?
Yeah, honestly, that it's a very fast moving situation right now, Katie. I'm here at the jail, like you mentioned, and outside it seems kind of like business as usual, but I would imagine inside the sheriff's office and beyond these walls, I'm sure they are scrambling. I'm sure they were happy to have some finality to this situation that's been happening for 5 months. 5 months is kind of crazy. It feels like it was yesterday, but also a year ago. We've been dealing with this in New Orleans for so long. And Derrick Groves, of course, the last inmate to be found. Now we know he was in Atlanta. Several of those escaped inmates, though, were found kind of quickly after we heard the news. We know that there was a huge scene in the French Quarter a few hours after they escaped, and some of those inmates were found there, some inmates found in other states. But Derrick Groves has been the one inmate they seemingly, had some issues and trouble locating specifically, but now we know that has come to an end. That day back in May 16th, was extremely hectic. Now, we know that the escape began in the early morning, hours before several people and most people across the city and the state knew what was happening. We know now that the escape happened or started around 12:30 in the morning that day, when they were, we've seen the video of them kind of pulling on that doors for several minutes. It seems like we know once they were able to breach that door, they were able to pull a toilet off of the wall. And after, we've all seen those pictures of the hole in the wall with the drawings that say "too easy" on the wall. We now know that, once they were able to get out of the jail, they escaped through a loading dock. They scaled a wall and then ran across the interstate. This again happened all in the early morning hours of May 16th, but we didn't really know what was happening until much later, and that has been a huge point of contention in this situation. The delay of notification. Now, we saw in the days after the escape, Sheriff Hudson and several law enforcement agencies go to City Council to present information on this, and the big question was, where was that delay in information, and why wasn't the public, the news, city leaders, state leaders told about this huge breach in the jail? So that still has been a point of discussion in the past 5 months, and I'm sure will continue to be a point of discussion. Because of that, we've heard Sheriff Susan Hudson say that there has been several safety and issues with things like locks in the jail, and she's been mentioning that for a long time, but again, that has been a point of discussion throughout all of this, and a question to the city council: are you going to help fund this? Are you going to help get things done that we need in the jail to prevent things like this from happening again? So still a lot of questions to be answered in that, but again, this has been such a long situation, 5 months now, coming to an end. Now, again, those 9 inmates who escaped but had been refound, whether it was in New Orleans or across state lines, they have all now been sitting in a state facility. We've seen pictures, and we know from state officials that after they were recaptured, they were taken to a state facility with what they officials say is better security, so they can essentially keep a better eye on them. So these cases are still wrapping up, but of course we'll continue to follow them. Katie, back to you.
Yeah, lots of great context and additional information there from Alyssa. I know you're going to continue to work your sources as well as this whole situation unfolds. I'm here with Mike McDaniel. If you're just joining us, escapee Derrick Groves has been recaptured in Southwest Atlanta. Now take a look at this, Mike. This is what we believe to be,
yeah, right
Derrick Groves.
Of that cruiser in Atlanta.
Not sure?
Yeah, not 100% sure, but we do believe that that could possibly be him being taken away from the scene there. We're going to slow down the video just to kind of give you a look. And we've seen the mugshot that we've been using of Derrick Groves, and it could be possibly.
Yes.
We are still waiting on law enforcement officials to confirm that of course, is in fact him. Of course, 5 months ago when this all happened, you even had the district attorney, Jason Williams, come out and say that he was personally afraid of Derrick Groves being on the loose because he tried this case tried those murder cases along with a couple of other lawyers as well, and they left the state.
They did.
Because out of fear of retaliation in some way.
Yes.
And hopefully, if this, of course, is Derrick Groves, which we do believe it is, that this can kind of give them some type of resolve moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, including all of the witnesses and people who've cooperated with law enforcement in the cases. You know, this was not Derrick Groves' first conviction either, so there have been other convictions that he has been in prison for in the past. And so, you know, a lot of people had been on edge when this happened 5 months ago and for the last 5 months as this has unfolded. I'll be interested to see if we can hear what that person is saying, if that is Derrick Groves, who was in the back of that police cruiser. Apparently, our people at the scene, some reporters saw him being taken out in handcuffs. So as far as we know, he was not injured as he was taken into custody.
And he didn't appear to be right there.
No, no. And law enforcement sources have said to me that, you know, they really had to search for him, that he may have been hiding in a crawl space underneath a home. Whether or not that was the initial home that they had responded to, that they used gas in, it's unclear. Those details hopefully will be coming out in the next little bit.
And look, there's a 5-month gap of what was happening, right? Who was helping him? We know that he didn't get to Atlanta just on his own. He was in a home. Whose home was it? Somebody knew where he was at some point, and that's going to be a big question law enforcement is going to be asking. How many people along the way actually helped him escape and keep him under wraps? Because Alyssa brought up a good point there, him being the outlier. You never really heard much from him.
No.
Or anything on social media. There were no pop-ups or sightings other than tips that may have come into Crime Stoppers or something, and we heard law enforcement would, you know, vet those tips out, every single one of them, but to no avail. But finally, something came in. Something happened, and we were able to track him down to Southwest Atlanta.
I'll be interested to see if that $100,000 Crime Stoppers reward for information contributed to this situation, and whether or not it actually was a tip that led to his recapture. I know that we do have 2 crews that are headed to the scene there in Atlanta, 2 different affiliates that we've been working with to try and get you the latest information on how this all unfolded and what the latest will be for Derrick Groves as he was taken into custody around 1 o'clock this afternoon.
And that's one of the good things about the partnerships we have with other stations across the country. I mean, they jumped at the opportunity, and we were able to get that video back and actually see perhaps Derrick Groves in the back of that cruiser there.